Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Appeals and Review Committee on Monday, the 28th of September 2020. This virtual meeting is being live streamed as a public meeting. It will also be recorded, and the recording subsequently made available via the Council's website. In addition, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulation 2014, other people may film, record, tweet, or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or recordings are not under control of the Council. Please note that members of the public viewing the meeting via live stream can only see the person who is speaking. Also, it takes a second or two for Zoom to switch view onto the person when they begin. Participants should please ensure that their microphones are muted when they are not speaking. Now, I'd like to confirm all those present who should be present. Councillors, will you please confirm that you can see and hear me when I call your name? My name is John Capleton. I'm chairing the meeting. I can see and hear everybody. Simon Bradshaw.
Councillor Simon Bradshaw, I can both see and hear the proceedings. Thank you, Chair.
Julian Howe.
Councillor Julian Howe, I can both see and hear the meeting.
Thank you. Keith Harris.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Keith Harris, I can both hear and see proceedings.
And Laurie Needham.
Good afternoon, Chair. Councillor Laurie Needham, and I confirm I can see and hear proceedings.
Thank you. I'd also going to ask each the officers to confirm that they can see and hear the proceedings, starting with the Information Development Manager, Matt Roger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the
Principal
proceedings.
Solicitor, Catherine Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear proceedings as well.
And the team leader from Natural and Built Environment, Mark Fennell. I can't see Mark.
Chair, I've just had a request from Mark just to ask me to resend in the invite, so I anticipate you'll be here in a moment or two.
Thank you. Senior Landscape Officer Nola O'Donnell.
Yes, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Have you disappeared, Nola? I can't see you. Oh dear, we seem to have lost Nola.
It may be she just lost connection. We'll let you know when she comes.
Oh yes, there she is. I can
see
her. Nola. Can you see and hear us, Nola? Yes, okay. Senior Ecological.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Ecological Officer Rupert Simms, I can't see. I think we're looking for him at the moment. Democratic Services Officer Laura Strong.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Chair.
And Democratic Services Officer Sally Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see the meeting.
Thank you very much. We also have the objectors to item 5. That's Mr. Joyce and Mr. Richard Jones. Can you both see and hear us?
I can. It's just Richard Jones. I don't think
Is Mr. Joyce not coming?
No.
Okay.
No, Chair, Mr. Jones has come as Mrs. Joyce's representative.
Right. Thank you. And item 6 objectors, Mrs. Stevenson Wheeler and Mr. Mastin. They seem
yes, I can see and hear you.
I can see and hear you also.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Good. Apologies. Well, as everybody's present, there can't be any apologies. So we move on to item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting on the 8th of June. Everybody remember this was concerned the entrance to Rearsby House on Melton Road and the trees on Lady Jane Park in Bradgate Road, Newtown, Linford. I've read them. I'm quite happy with the meetings, with the minutes. Anybody, any objections to minutes?
Chair, I wasn't at that meeting, so I'd have to abstain from any vote.
Abstain, right, of course you won't. And Julian? You confirm, yes?
Yeah, I
Keith,
confirm.
Yeah, Keith and Laurie.
Yes, I confirm.
Do I have a seconder? Yes, seconder?
I'll second the minutes, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Councillor Needham. Right, so then we're going to accept the meetings. There'll be no objections, so it'll be signed and received as noted. Item 3, questions under Question under other committee procedures. Well, there are no questions were submitted. Also, disclosure of pecuniary and personal interest. Do any councillors have any declarations they wish to make? No, everybody's shaking their heads.
Councillor Capleton, Councillor Bradshaw has an interest I think he'd like to declare.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a personal interest in item 6 as the ward councillor for Syston East. The applicant is not known to me and I come to the meeting with an open mind. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, shall we move on to item 5 then, which is 11 Ticklow Lane Shipshed as a tree preservation order. And first of all, could I ask Principal Solicitor Catherine Harrison to introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're here tonight to consider 2 items, and first is the Borough of Charnwood 11 Ticklow Lane Shepshed Tree Preservation Order 2020. The order was made as a provisional tree preservation order on the 1st of May 2020. It's been brought to the committee this evening to be considered by members as the order has been objected to. Members have a copy of the agenda for the evening's meeting, and in there you'll find a copy of the tree preservation order we're considering, along with a copy of the objections made to the order and also the report from the head of planning and regeneration as to why the council officers believe the order should be confirmed. There's also an additional items report which sets out some further information from the objector. The committee will need to consider the officer's report, the objections and representations received and discussion this evening, and decide whether, in the interest of amenity, the trees covered in the provisional order should be protected by a full tree preservation order. The committee, after hearing the debate, may confirm the provisional order with or without modification, or it may decide not to confirm the order, in which case the provisional order will cease to have effect after that decision has been endorsed on the order. I think, Chair, unless you've got any questions, I think hand back to you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Senior Landscape Officer Nola O'Donnell to present her case for the tree preservation order, please? Nola.
Yes. I seem to have lost the connection to the paperwork I had a second ago. Hang on. Oh, there I am. Yes.
Are you with us?
Yes. We received a planning application with regard to the property, and I was asked for my opinion on the proposals for a double garage. And it was apparent to me that the design layout did not take the British Standard 5837 2012 trees in relation to design, demolition and construction into account. I gave advice on how to mitigate likely impacts, and ideally they should have a proper tree survey and impact assessment to guide their design. The applicant was concerned, and they expressed an opinion that they would fell the trees if they weren't protected. So I felt the only way to protect the trees was to place them under a tree preservation order. The site is a domestic dwellings front garden, historically with an open aspect without a significant boundary. In the case of the sycamore tree, which they're not really objecting to that TPO, as far as I understand, that tree is in a good condition. In the case of the beech tree, I described that as a fair condition tree due to the presence of minor Ganoderma at the base of the stem. The objections from Mrs. Joyce, there were roughly 6 points, and if I just go through my responses to the objections in regard to those. Her first objection said we had a tree report carried out providing additional information. My comment to that is true, I did advise that. The objector point doesn't actually amount to an objection reason. Number 2, The copper beech tree was marked T2, is being described by her as a deceased tree and given a retention category U. The copper beech tree is not deceased, it's very much alive. I dispute the assignment of category U. The tree is not in such a poor condition to merit category U. It is alive, has good branch structure, and although colonized by Ganoderma, which is a fungal fruiting body. In an email to the case officer, I gave a response, which I won't summarize or go through that, but I did give a response to the points she raised, giving a lot of advice and giving opinion. The third point, the tree inspector, she says, describing me, queried what the tree inspector, hang on, she described her own consultant as the tree inspector, queried why the council's officer had applied a tree preservation order to the tree, when clearly, to the trained eye, the copper beech is at the end of its life. My point with that is that actually I conveyed a lot of advice to the applicants and to their agent, and also discussed the issue of the Ganoderma when that was brought up. Now, there seems to be an issue over the professional opinions here of different people. Now, clearly, I'm not a tree specialist, but I do on a regular basis consult tree specialists, both in Leicestershire County Council and in our own grounds, open space grounds, open space officer and the grounds contractor, and also other consultants whom I often discuss interesting details about tree management with. And the unanimous opinion is, when they saw evidence of this Ganoderma, was that you would monitor the tree and you would normally carry out perhaps a crown reduction if there was dieback occurring in the tree. But ultimately you would carry out either a resistograph test or a Pictus test to determine basically the strength and the supporting mechanism of the tree at its base. Now, I don't carry out resistograph tests and I'm not trained to do so. I'm not an arborist. And what I will say about that is that neither are planning officers, builders, engineers, or architects, but they evaluate what is submitted to them in the course of a planning application. And I similarly assess the information that I get in to assess. Having consulted a range of qualified arborists, including consultants at level 6, the general opinion is that for that level of Ganoderma present in a tree, is that the tree is not dangerous, it's not dead, it's not deceased, and you would monitor it. And one of those people I consulted about the tree was indeed a highway tree safety officer. So I'm not just coming to my conclusions on my own as a landscape architect without proper training. I am consulting a range of people about the tree and about the incidence of Ganoderma on that tree. The other point she made was, sorry, I have to come backwards and forwards on a single screen. She says, we cannot see how it's possible to protect and retain in a satisfactory manner a tree which is severely diseased and at the end of its life. Well, that's not actually the case. The tree is not seriously diseased and it's not at the end of its life. It does have Ganoderma on it, but it's not dangerous. And indeed, the highway safety inspector, who did cast his eye over the tree, said he didn't regard it as dangerous and needing immediate action. So her next point was she appreciates the need to protect trees, but she would appreciate being reinstated to the pre-application status. I'm not entirely certain what she meant by this. She agreed that there is a need to protect trees. The TPO is the legal basis to actually provide tree protection. The removal of the legal protection would actually render the tree vulnerable to improper works, severance of anchor roots, and potential felling. So I'm not really sure what her objection point there was. As I say, the appropriate thing to do for trees outside of a conservation area where there is an issue or where there is a development is actually to create a TPO. Her final comment was to express emotional upset and frustration at the issue to do with another site within Shepshed. And I feel this is out with the scope of this committee and not relevant to this particular issue at hand. And therefore, I have no further comment to make on that.
Okay.
Basically, if we remove the order, we will be removing protection to the trees, and they would be prone to felling. The advice that was given to me by arboricultural consultants from a range of, if you like, both public and private sector, is that what one would do is request a resistograph or pictus test to be carried out. I therefore urge the committee to confirm the order without modification.
Okay, thank you, Nola. Has any of the committee any questions they'd like to ask of Nola? Yes, Laurie?
Hello, thank you, Chair. Hold on, I scribbled it down and now I've lost where I've scribbled it down. Hold on. Okay, I'll just ask. Before, Nola, when you were talking about the issue of whether the tree is or isn't dead or is or isn't dangerous, and that there's a conflict of professional opinion, is the only way, are you saying that the only way to sort of resolve that is with a resistograph test, and that hasn't been done yet? Would a resistograph test solve that difference of opinion in a sort of black and white fashion?
It would certainly give evidence, because at the moment we're talking about opinions which are differing. But if a resistograph or a pictus test, there are two different types of tests, and I'm not an expert in them, but it's what tree consultants and people working at local authority level across Leicestershire would say should be carried out. So it would provide the evidence to an instability or a weakness in the timber of the tree. The issue of, let me just see if I can bring it up. A resistograph is a mechanical resistance measurement device produced by Frank Rinn. So basically you're looking at the density of the wood, and therefore that's a measure of whether or not it has strength and integrity. In the case of a pictus test, let me see, where does that say? It measures decay within trees. That's a simple way of describing it without going into any great detail. So both those tests would provide evidence to support or not the claim that the tree should be felled.
Okay, Nola, thank you very much. Julian, you put your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. In some of the supplementary information we've received, it said with the British Standard and the U that it that's the letter U, not the tree U.
Yes.
Confuse matters. That its life is more than 10 years. Now, I know this is a bit like asking a doctor in a hospital, but I mean, do you believe that the tree would last as long as that, from your opinion, or isn't it possible to say? Thank you.
I can't express an opinion on that. I can only say what I've been advised by qualified arboriculturists and tree surgeons. And that is, if there was an issue where you want to save a tree, but there is pressure to have that tree felled, well, the deciding factor would be getting that evidence.
Okay, Simon, you.
Thank you, Chair. Part of Mrs. Joyce's additional information seems to suggest she thinks the tree is in danger of immediate collapse. Would that be the case in your opinion, do you think?
No.
Well, but I'm not an arboriculturist, but as I said before, I consulted a range of people whom I often liaise with and discuss tree matters with. And one of them was the highway safety officer. And he actually popped along to Ticko Lane and he said he did not think the tree was in danger of collapsing. Okay.
I was looking at the reports here, and it's on page 4, item 6.4, tree loss and retention within the development area. And it says substantial granularia decay fungus is located at the base of photograph 1. There is evidence of wood degradation around the fruiting body. Light tapping with a sounding hammer have found fungus around fungus revealed a hollow tone. We easily pushed a screwdriver into the stem just above the fruiting body. And the granularia is in advanced stage. Do we place any significance on that?
That is Mr. Jones' professional opinion. I am not a tree specialist, and I didn't go around tapping with screwdrivers or hammers. I don't do that as part of my job. I consulted a number of arboriculturists, and they said the deciding issue should be decided. The issue should be decided by getting a test. I understand that ID Verdi provide that service, but of course we in the council, in the planning department, don't have a budget for carrying out those tests. Okay. So I have no way of carrying out that test, but I do believe that ID Verdi, who does the grounds maintenance for the council, do provide that test when they think a tree might need to come out, and we need to make a decision. There are other situations where council trees, actual council trees, have Ganoderma in public areas, and that is something that will be done for those trees.
Okay. Anybody else any further questions for Nola? Julian?
Chair, I did raise my blue hand some time ago.
Sorry, okay, sorry.
I'll defer to Kat.
Yes, got to ask Nola, could it be the procedure that we, if we were to confirm it, that one of those tests or both could then bring the issue back, so the TPO being confirmed wouldn't stop those tests being carried out, and if they showed that the tree was dangerous or wasn't as robust as we thought, we could reverse it?
If an application was submitted to fell
underneath the TPO,
if the TPO was confirmed without modification, covering both trees, because it does cover, I think, both of them, doesn't it? Yes, it covers both trees. So you would have to confirm without modification to protect the tree with the Ganoderma. The likelihood is they would submit an application to fell, which I believe is what Richard Jones has advised Mrs. Joyce. And I would be looking for that test to be provided as evidence that the tree needs to come out. We do not habitually or every time Ganoderma is found on a tree, fell those trees. They are not automatically dangerous. It's simply, if Leicestershire County Council was to fell every street tree with Ganoderma, the countryside would be denuded of trees.
Okay.
There's Ganoderma on quite a lot of them. In fact, I met with one of the forestry team a year or two ago, and we went walking around looking at street trees within a conservation area. And the tree officer stuck his foot right into the base of the tree and said, there, you know, this tree has a decay pocket, but we're not felling it now. We're monitoring it. So I think there needs to be an understanding that you don't just automatically fell because it's hollow, even at the base. You don't automatically fell because Ganoderma is present. There is a general feeling that if a beech tree had Myripilus, that you probably should fell and not even wait to get a test done on the structural integrity of the root system, because that can affect that particular disease in beech trees, Myripilus. Attacks the feeder roots. No, sorry, it attacks the structural roots, not the feeder ones. So the tree can look magnificent, but actually can be very unstable underneath. But just to give you an insight into the variation of opinions you can have within arboriculture, you can have one consultant saying, actually, we need a resistograph on this tree with Myripilus. And maybe a couple of others will say, actually, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to have to take the tree out, so fell it. So there isn't a hard and fast opinion, and it's not black and white. It's a spectrum of opinion. So even in the profession, properly accredited, registered, chartered consultants, there'll be a range of opinion. Because I did take out a tree, at least authorised it, under Regulation 14 exemption felling as a dangerous tree, a beech tree in Newtown Linford a year or two ago. And after it had been carried out, one of the tree consultants who lives and works in Leicestershire commented to me, no, you should have got a resistograph test done on it before you had it felled. So, you know, I can only go on what they, the experts, say, and there is a range of opinion within the profession as to how you respond to the presence of disease in trees, fungal pathogens, we normally call them. And in the case of Myripilus, you normally, most of them will say, actually, you kind of should fell the tree if it's got Myripilus. Don't waste time trying to get tests. But at least one guy said, well, actually, I'd have got the test done because that tree was a significant, substantial tree in the church grounds beside the entrance to Bradgate Park. So he said, you know,
okay,
if you had done the test, you could have made a more nuanced decision about it.
So could I verify that then, that if we were minded to confirm the order, then it doesn't preclude the applicants from getting tests done and coming back with, for example, firm proof that we made the wrong decision and it could be overturned.
That's true. That if they submitted an application proving from whatever tests they opted for that this tree was in fact compromised at its base and therefore at risk of collapse, then we would of course conditionally consent the felling or straightforward consent. I think I'd probably conditionally do it because I'd condition a replacement. If it was to come in as just a regulation 14 request, a 5-day notification with a PICTUS test or a resistor craft test that proved that the base of the tree was compromised, it's an automatic requirement to replace that tree. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nola. Julian, did you have your hand up a little while ago?
No, Chair. I think the points I wanted to raise have just been covered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No further questions for Nola? No. Okay. Could I ask, I think it's Mr. Jones is representing the objector. Mr. Jones, do you have any questions for Nola, and would you like to present your case for for cancelling the TPOs, please?
Yeah, I'd like to put my case forward. I don't have any questions for Nola directly, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, I'd just like to introduce myself, if that's okay. Just briefly, I just wanted to confirm that I am an arboriculturist with more than 30 years experience in the tree and landscape management industries. I'm a chartered arboriculturalist and fellow of the Arboricultural Association, and also Institute of Chartered Foresters registered consultant. I hold various qualifications, including a National Diploma in Arboriculture and an International Society of Arboriculture Tree Risk Assessment qualification. And I do act for local authorities as a freelance tree officer, including South Kesteven District Council in Lincolnshire, and also, ironically, Leicestershire County Council's forestry section. I'm sorry, it's a bit strange because I can't see anybody's faces, but I'll just go on if that's okay.
Certainly, yes, carry on.
Give a bit of brief. The background is very similar. Nola described it well. My brief was to come and inspect the beech tree, the copper beech tree, and the sycamore tree, in respect particularly to the proposed development by Mr. and Mrs. Joyce, which has subsequently been granted planning permission. I undertook a survey and produced a report which the planning permission refers directly back to, in that the work should be carried out along the lines of the report. When I inspected the copper beech tree, I noted that it was infected with a known decay fungus, which Nola has described as Ganoderma. I noticed fruiting bodies at the base, and as I said in my report, I pushed a screwdriver in around there and noticed that the wood was soft. The fruiting bodies appeared to have been there for some time. There was staining around the area, which corroborated that. And I can also confirm that there are fresh, brand new fruiting bodies as of the 24th of September, which is a clear indication to me that the fungus is active. And I would point out that Ganoderma fungus is a decay pathogen of beech trees and other broadleaf trees that in its advanced stage can cause the tree or the stem to break. I categorise the beech tree as a U, as Nola was talking about. That's unsuitable for retention in terms of the British Standard 5837 guidelines, which recommends that trees with a life expectancy of no greater than 10 years are unsuitable for retention. This was particularly in view of the buildings around the existing buildings around the tree, the hard surface, the parking area, and also bearing in mind that new building proposals were in place and that they've subsequently been granted planning permission, which could significantly increase costs in terms of managing that tree by way of pruning and of course complete removal. It's been accepted by Nola in her comments, and that the tree is in decline. I believe it's in the latter stages of its life. She suggested that crown reduction may be a possibility, which in my view accepts that there is a degree of risk associated with this tree. But what I would also point out, and it's my considerable experience, that beech trees, particularly copper beech trees, do not respond at all well to crown reduction pruning. Crown reduction pruning opens up multiple wounds and causes additional stress to a tree. I would point. It's my view that this beech tree wouldn't tolerate the degree of pruning that's necessary to mitigate the risks that are associated with this tree. I'd like also to discuss the recommendation that NOLA made with regard to a decay detection assessment being carried out, whether that's by resistograph or otherwise. This would be an additional expense, in my view, to my client, Mr. and Mrs. Joyce, which would be on top of additional regular inspections which would need to be carried out probably every 12 to 18 months. And I appreciate what Nola has said with respect to the what some local authorities do, including Leicestershire County Council, but that, from a county council's point of view, or any local authority's point of view, that employs maybe 3 full-time tree officers plus 2 or 3, possibly 4 tree inspectors. That's not that sort of onus is unreasonable, in my view, to place on owners of a residence where there is a known decay fungus is present. I suppose, in conclusion, really, it really is my experience that tree preservation orders shouldn't be confirmed on trees that are in decline. That is from working as well as assistant tree officer for Derby City Council in their planning section for 7 years. They're clearly designed to protect trees that, when it's expedient in the interest of amenity in the long term. And finally, a known decay fungus has been identified which could cause it to fail. And on that basis, I'd respectfully request that the committee confirm the TPO, but in a modified way by excluding the copper beech tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Members of the committee, do any of you have any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Jones? Any points of clarification? No, okay. Nola, do you have any questions for Mr. Jones?
Well, it's interesting he should say that the beech tree shouldn't be pruned, because beech trees are habitually pruned throughout the borough and the county. So I do take the point that they don't, they probably shouldn't be pruned habitually. They shouldn't be pollarded, but you can and do, people do. We get applications and conservation area notices to prune beech trees, and they are pruned. And the requests for that are often accompanied by tree reports. So it's not, if you like, against the principle of arboriculture to do so. The other thing I'd like to say is that ID Verdi's price for a resistograph test is less than £200. It's about 160. So we're not talking about thousands and thousands of pounds. We're talking about a discrete sum for a discrete test that provides evidence. There was another point he made, and I forgot to make a note. Sorry, I can't remember.
Is that it, Nola? Is that it, Nola?
Yes, pretty much, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, is any members of the committee require any additional information from either parties? No, a lot of shaking heads, good. Okay, so now the committee, with the advisor's legal advisor as necessary, will now discuss this matter and then decide whether or not the order should be confirmed, and if so, whether with or without modification. During this part of the meeting, the parties may not participate. However, this remains a public meeting and the parties may continue to observe if they wish. Okay, committee. Anybody got anything to say, anything profound I'd like to throw into the ring? Yes, Julian.
Thank you, Chair. When I go round the borough, there are some trees I look forward to seeing. This particular tree isn't in an area I go on, but looking at the photographs, it is a fine looking tree. That's highly visual because of its location. And from my point, if it goes, it goes. There's no appeal, there's nothing, it goes. We're stuck between two sets of experts who disagree with each other. So the tree clearly not not 100% healthy, but is it dangerous? And I personally think that if it is possible to test to come up with results that can indicate more accurately the tree, that we should confirm the TPO on both the trees. There's nothing to prevent a test coming, the tree being tested and the result being accepted by the borough. I think also from what Nola said, that we have our own tree policy where we check trees. And I think if this was in the borough's domain, that we wouldn't take it down. We might prune it, but we wouldn't take it down. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Oh yes, Councillor Needham.
I tend to agree with what Councillor Howe has just said. I just wanted to check, and I think I do know the answer to this, but I just wanted Catherine to confirm it for me. Can we take into account the financial burden on the owners of the TPO? Is that can we take that into account at all?
Sorry, a minute, I might unmute. The predominant test is a test of amenity, but there's no restriction on grounds that objections can be made on. So it's something to take into account, but the main test is an amenity test and whether to make the TPO order or not. It's something you can weigh up, but yeah, does that help? Is that sufficient?
Yes, thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to check just exactly what we could consider. Thank you.
Anybody else? No. Okay. Well, I went out to have a look at the trees, and I must say, from the road anyway, they're quite fine-looking trees. So as far as amenity value is concerned, I don't think there's any question at all. So it all has to come down to the health of the trees. And here we have a great difference of opinion. I'm afraid I go along with Julian, that I think, well, I'd like to make a proposal actually, because we need a proposal and a seconder. I'm going to propose that we confirm the tree preservation order. Obviously, the applicant has the right at any time in the future to apply to remove the tree. But in the meantime, I propose that we retain them. Anybody going to second that?
I'd be happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. Now we need a vote. I'm afraid it has to be a named vote because well, that's the way it has to be done nowadays. So I proposed it, so my vote is for it. And Julian?
Councillor Howe, I've heard and seen all of the discussion, and I vote in favour of your proposal to what is it? To keep
to endorse the
to keep the tree preservation order. It's not. It's to turn it from a temporary to a full one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I vote in favour of that. Yeah.
I think if,
yeah.
Sorry, if I may, just to clarify, I think the proposal that we put forward is to confirm the order without modification.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I could vote to confirm the order.
Okay. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to accept the order without modification.
Thank you. Keith?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Keith Harris. I've been present throughout the proceedings, and I'm happy to confirm.
Thank you. Laurie?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Laurie Needham, I've seen, heard and took part in all of the proceedings, and I'm also voting in favour of confirming the order without modification.
Thank you very much. So the committee, having considered the situation, considers that the sorry, Catherine.
Sorry, Councillor Copeland, did you do your vote? You would usually go last. I know you proposed, but I don't think you've. I know you've made the proposition, but I don't think you've actually stated your vote.
Yes, my vote is in favour of keeping the tree preservation order. Thank you. Right, so the committee, having considered the situation, considers that the objection protecting the trees are not outweighed. So we feel that the preservation order should be confirmed. Thank you very much. Catherine, is that all right?
Yes, Chair. I'll add it was a unanimous vote of five in favour of confirming it, no votes against.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now we move on to item 6, which is the trees at 1323 Melton Road, Syston. And I'd like to ask the Principal Solicitor, Catherine Harrison, to introduce the report.
Sorry, Chair, just get my papers. Yes, so we're here tonight to consider the second item, which is the Borough of Charnwood 1323 Melton Road, Syston Tree Preservation Order 2020. The order has been made provisionally and it's here before members to be considered because it has been objected to. As before, members have a copy of the agenda, which contains the copy of the tree preservation order we're considering, a copy of the objections that have been received, and also a copy of the the head of planning and regeneration's report, which sets out why officers believe the tree should be protected. There's also an additional items report for this item and a further items report which included an amended plan.
Yes.
Again, the options are the same as before, so the committee will need to consider the reports, listen to the debate this evening, and the objections that have been received, and decide whether in their view the order should be made confirmed with or without modification, or not confirmed, in which case the order will fall away once the decision has been endorsed on it.
Thank you very much. Could I ask the Senior Ecological Officer, Rupert Simms, to present the case, please?
Yes, hello, good evening, everybody. I'll just start by saying I've got my camera turned off and I've turned all you off as well because my line's very crackly and that does seem to help. So I'm afraid that's why you can't see me and I can't see you.
Oh, we can hear you. We can hear you, Rupert.
Great, that's great. Okay, I hope I'm not too loud. This order was made in response to a planning advice inquiry that we received for the property. That's immediately a bit of a tricky situation because, of course, as a planning authority, we want people to approach us and engage us with their ideas for planning applications. The plan application process to be smooth. Hello?
Rupert, we're struggling to hear you.
Can you hear me?
It keeps on breaking up. We'll keep trying.
Okay, all right. If it persists, I'll maybe come out and come back in again, and hopefully that might help.
Okay.
Can you hear me any better now?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a bit tricky. We want people to engage with us, but at the same time, when we have an order, like when we have an advice request like that, we're well aware from previous experience that it can signal that a site is about to be cleared. Now, that's not a personal reflection on anybody, any individuals involved, but it's a reality that we're well aware of, and that's really the basis of the reason of expedience for making this order, and the basis of a perceived risk to these trees. Now, it's important to say, excuse me, that notwithstanding the order, provisional or confirmed, the chapter is still at liberty to make plan, and were they to do so, the granting of planning permission would override the order, and so they wouldn't need to. It wouldn't prevent them from making an application or hinder their application process. But what it would mean is that the trees could be, or the impact of their proposals on those trees could be properly considered. So turning from that to the amenity, I've assessed these trees as a group because they're all within the same back garden, and they have a more or less continuous canopy. Although the canopy of the trees is at different heights, they overlap each other, and a number of the photographs in your packs will show that. So the trees consist of 5 individuals. I've made the order for 5 individual trees rather than a group order, because the advice we've had from the legal department in the past has been quite clear that when a tree is individually identified in an order, it is much easier to protect it run. And so I hope that resolves any confusion that might arise out of the fact that I've assessed the trees as being part of the same group, but made the order for 5 individual trees. So there's a birch tree, there's 2 apple trees, a plum, and an ash. You can see that the ash and the birch are large trees, and they're clearly visible from Gloucester Road, from Melton Road, and indeed from Mostyn Avenue that runs parallel to Gloucester Avenue. The birch I've used as tempo assessment to assess these trees, and in the case of the ash, it came out as definitely meriting a TPO. In the case of the other 4 trees, a TPO was shown as defensible. I want to just spend a little bit of time looking at the silver birch there and the way I've assessed that. The way I approach tempo assessments is typically to be very conservative, especially when I can't make a really detailed and close-up examination of the tree. And I've assessed the condition of that birch tree as being poor. And that's really because there are climbers around the trunk, so it's impossible to see the base of the stem. And although it has a vigorous canopy, it looks generally healthy. I think it would be perfectly reasonable to say it was in a fair or even good condition. I've assessed it as poor because of that uncertainty. And even with that very conservative assessment, it's still showing that a TPO is defensible. Now, turning to the fruit trees, the 2 apples and the plum, I included those because you can see from my photographs, if it helps to share a screen at some point, I may do that, but rather than complicating matters at this stage, if I could draw your attention to photograph 3 in my Annex 4 report, you can see trees 2 and 3 along the walkway of Gloucester Avenue. It's a part of Syston which is really quite unattractive, and the objector has drawn attention to that really herself by saying it's sometimes a focus for antisocial activity. It's not, it's a bit of a gloomy passage. And so whilst those fruit trees aren't in themselves exceptional, in that context, they do contribute quite a lot, and they liven up that area. They are in a private garden, but they add clear visual amenity. They may or may not provide, a good crop, but that's for the owner really. They are, and the crop, of course, is hers. It's their visual amenity to passers-by in that otherwise really quite unattractive part of Syston that I think means that they merit protection. I've noticed in making a follow-up visit quite recently is that tree 2 seems to have lost a little bit of vigor. In my initial visit, it really had quite a vigorous canopy. It was in full leaf. I'm dry, I'm a bit croaky, I'm afraid. It looked very much like a healthy tree. In my subsequent visit, I have to say it was less so. And so there's perhaps a question about whether tree T2 still merits protection. It may be in decline, but on balance, my advice is it's a light danger. It's not so significantly high that if it collapsed, it would cause any harm. And it's still there. It's still in leaf, and it's still contributing to that view along Syston, along Gloucester Avenue. Were that tree to go, then T3 that you can see behind T2 would become, much more important in that vista. Although the group would be diminished, of course, if tree T2 went. The tree that I have since got a question about whether or not should be included in the order is the plum tree, because its view is much more restricted, and although when you consider it as part of the group, it does just about merit DPO. I think there's scope for a compromise in leaving T4, the plum tree, which you can't see in that photograph on photograph 3, and so there may be some scope for modifying that order. I'll stop talking now and see if people have got some questions.
Okay, yes, fine. Yes, does any members of the committee have any questions for Rupert? Julian, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Rupert, are all the trees mature, or are they likely to grow any bigger? Or is that an impossible question to ask?
Well, trees grow throughout their lives, but they reach a sort of a threshold size, really, where really they're losing as much. Mature trees is the answer, and that's reflected in the life expectancy that I've assessed them as having.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Anybody, Simon?
No.
Hi, Rupert. Could I just ask if we did remove, say that T4 was removed, what would be the effect on the visual amenity then? Would there be much difference, or do you think, or?
Rupert, are you there?
I'm not sure if. Oh, hello. I'm not sure if that question's finished, but I didn't hear any of it. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes. No, Rupert, you've gone again.
Question at all? That question at all, I'm afraid. Yeah. Perhaps if. Can you hear me now?
Well, yes, but it's not a bit indistinct. But try again.
Okay. Do you want me to ask again, Chair?
Yes, all right, yes.
Hello, Rupert. Yeah, I was just going to say that if T4 was removed.
Yeah, I'm just typing in the chat. So if you have a look at the chat, can you hear me now?
Yes, you become clear again.
Okay. I didn't hear the question at all. And so what I'm going to do is come out of the meeting and then come back in and see if that clears up the reception. But in the meantime, if there's any way of providing the last question, perhaps in the chat, because I didn't even hear, one word in 10, I don't think. If that could be typed into the chat, I might be able to answer it immediately.
Rupert, if you just want to take
Hi, Laura.
Hi, can you hear me okay? If you want to take...
No, sorry, I can't hear. I'm going to go out and come back. I'm going to go out and come back in.
Laura?
Yeah, hi, who's that?
Yeah,
Matt?
yes, lost live feed there.
Okay.
So there's a break. There's a break in transmission. You are now host, so your feed is now broadcasting.
Okay.
Okay, so you need to go onto the speaker view.
Yeah.
But in terms of continuity, there was a break for 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think probably Matt, for most of that we had a bit of problem with
Rupert's audio. Yes.
Yeah, if we wait for Rupert to return, sorry everybody, if we just wait for Rupert to return to the meeting for a moment.
Yes, all right, that's fine.
Then we will pick up if Councillor Bradshaw could ask his question again when we do. And I think hopefully, I'm not sure exactly when we lost the live stream, Matt, but I think probably if it was just a couple of minutes, we're fine.
That's fine, Laura. Yeah, I can ask again. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep an eye out for Rupert coming back in. If he's unable to get back into the meeting, Mark, are you able to help with the questions from the committee, please?
Yes, I can do that, Laura. That's no problem.
Lovely, thank you. We'll just give him a moment, and if he's unable to come in, we'll proceed with the meeting. Right, here we go. Right, Rupert, can you hear me okay? Are you back into the meeting? You might just need to unmute, please.
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, so what we're going to do, Rupert, Councillor Bradshaw will ask the question again that we missed when you had trouble with your connection.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly now. That's great. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Okay, so Councillor Bradshaw, if that's okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rupert. Yeah, I'm just going to say, if the plum tree T4 was removed, would there still be a good visual amenity, or would there be sort of a gap left, do you think?
I think there would. There might be a very slight gap, but as you can see from photograph 3, and as I've assessed it, the tree has it's got limited visibility. So I've included it as a member of the group for the coherence of that group, but I don't think it would be a significant loss to take that tree out of the group. And I think that's what the objector is asking for. I think that's a reasonable compromise. So yeah, there'd be a slight impact, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't class it as significant.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? No. Well, Rupert, looking at the tempo assessment chart that you included with the pack.
Yeah.
And it shows that the birch T1 has been quite viable. But T2 and 3, as you come down to the subtotals, and it says at this point you need to have accrued 7 points to continue. Well, T2 has 5 points, T3 has 7 points, and T4 has 6 points.
If you look at the... Sorry, carry on.
Yes, go down further. Yes, and then further down, subtotal total 2, birch has 8 points, and T3 has 8 points as well. I'm a little confused.
I think what you're looking at is the objection. If you have a look at the Appendix 1 in the Annex 4 report that I produced,
yeah.
T1 at that point has 4 + 2, that's 7 points. The Apple T2 has 7 points. So the objector has amended that T2 to reflect poor condition. That's not the condition it was in when I assessed it. I have been back since, and it might be that condition needs to be reassessed. But at the time that I assessed that tree and tree 3 as well, which also has 7 points,
yes.
Then all those trees met that 7-point threshold and it was appropriate to carry on that assessment. The exception was T4, which, as I explained before, I included as a member of the group. Given that tempo is a guidance, it's a guide to follow, but there needs to be some scope for interpretation. I included it as a member of that group, but have suggested it might be withdrawn from the order.
Good. You see, I went out to have a look at the trees, and I can well see that T1 and T5 do have a very visual impact from the road, both from Melton Road and then, of course, from round the back. The only way you can really see 2, 3, and 4 is when you come down the footpath into as the road starts and sort of stand back along the grass. They haven't a visual impact from there, but from most of the surrounding areas, they don't.
I would agree with that, but I included them because they were visible along the footpath and because the footpath is otherwise really quite unattractive. And so in that context of the place being otherwise quite bleak, I felt that they did contribute to that view. But I agree, yes, you can't see them from the road, you can't see them from a distance, and that's why I've assessed them in the tempo assessment. If you look at the one that I've provided in my report, I've assessed them as being medium trees with a limited view. I've assessed T4 as being a small tree which is visible with difficulty. And so following the assessment that way, that seems to me to be consistent with both what you've observed and what I observed in making my own assessment.
Okay, then. Anybody else? Well, yes, Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I can see we've included them as a group, but if T1 and T5 have the TPO preserved, the other 3 trees are in between.
Yes.
So I was a bit confused as to exactly, because I'd assumed if the planning, I don't know what the planning was for, but if it was something off the house, it would impact T1 first before it got to the other 3 trees anyway. You see what I mean? Because they're either extreme with the 3 in the middle. So I must admit, I sort of confused me a bit, because I'd have thought if you're building from the house, T1 would be affected, or
The advice application we've had covers the whole site. Now, clearly the applicant's got an idea about what they think they'd like to do there and what would be appropriate. My job at this point isn't to consider the details of those plans, and that's really a job for the planning process once we receive an application. But what I've done in response to that perceived risk, all those trees are potentially at risk. T5 clearly, because it's a significant tree and it overhangs quite a lot of the advised site, and T1 because it's it's just about within it or within the edge of it, and the other 3 trees because they're right in the middle of it. But it's not for me to consider the details of the application at the moment, because I'm not assessing an application. I'm assessing the merits of these trees now that I've identified that there's a risk to them, or a potential risk to them, I should say.
Councillor Howe?
Yeah, certainly. And am I correct that irrespective of if there is a TPO, planning consent can override the TPO?
Absolutely, yes, it does. Yeah, it does. It effectively, if works to a TPO are necessary to implement a planning permission, then there's de facto consent to do those works.
Does that include removal as well, or just works?
Yes, it would. It would do were that necessary. There's a judgment obviously to be made about what's necessary and what's not. For example, but if for example we were to grant planning permission for a house or a building of some kind in the location where a TPO tree is, then there is permission to remove that tree. if for example there are overhanging branches or there's a root impact associated with that, then it's a bit more tricky. But by having these trees protected, it means that we can, and we'd apply this in other situations as well. It means we can assess the impact of the proposal on those trees, rather than finding out that the trees have already been removed and that there's nothing there to protect anymore or to consider. So it enables us to take into account those trees as part of the planning application, but that's not really our job, I don't think, to consider that today. It's to consider the merits of those trees themselves and whether they're worth protecting in the first place.
No, thank you very much. But I was just making the point that it isn't permanent what we're doing today.
No, yeah, you know, no, that's correct. Yeah,
any development or anything, in case, just to make it clear to anyone listening to the meeting, really, because I thought I'd got an idea. Thank you very much. I've got no more.
Yeah, great.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Keith, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask about the 3 trees in the middle, 2, 3, and 4. If 2 and 4 were to be removed, does that isolate number 3 in that there are gaps on either side of it, and it thereby loses its group identity in the amenity value?
It would do at that point, actually, and being set back deeper into the plot than T2, there'd be a question then about how much that contributed to the view along Gloucester Avenue, and it's a matter of judgment as to how much that would be the case before removing those trees, if those trees were to be removed. But you're right, they would isolate that tree and the group would be broken up effectively. Yes.
Okay, no more questions. Right, could I ask the objector, Mrs. Catherine Stevenson and Jonah Mastin, do you want any questions you want to ask of the officers, and would you like them to present your case?
I would like to, this is Catherine Stevenson Wheeler, the objector. I would just like to clarify, you've correctly pointed out how I view the tempo rating, that I recreated the chart, and I did use the tempo rating from the internet, and I've just tried to highlight, because it wasn't shown, that there are subtotals that have to be achieved before moving on to the next elements for the trees to qualify.
Right.
And the only condition I changed was for T2, the apple, as was identified by Rupert on his further visit. I've left everything else the same, and I've just changed that one to poor condition as highlighted on his second visit. And what that shows is the subtotal of T2 and T4 come in at 5 and 6. So therefore they shouldn't have continued with the TPO because they didn't make 7 points. And all I've tried to do with showing that tempo rating is to highlight the 2 subtotaled elements to show why I didn't think that trees should have gone on to be TPO'd.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Could I also add the grouping as well? Because there have been, I must stress that these trees have been bought as 5 individual. It's very clear in the original TPO and the background information that the 5 trees have been bought about as individuals. And I struggle a little bit with the fact that they are now being spoken of as a group, because I feel that this enables scores to be given higher, which is a subjective view as to whether you think they're a group or they're individual trees. And I'd like to think that some of my photographs have shown that there are clear spaces between the trees. That I think it's a little unfair to treat them as a group when the TPOs have been raised as an individual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did. I missed some of what you said, but I think you were asking about the tempo assessment and you were explaining what you'd changed. And then you were talking about the group assessment as opposed to the individual assessment, and you wanted some explanation around that. If I look at the tempo assessment to start with, if I look at the original chart, there's one tree that doesn't get that that score of 7 to enable the assessment to continue, and that's the plum. And I've suggested that there's maybe a case for having that removed. As opposed to, as far as the group versus the individual assessment is concerned, I explained a little earlier, I've assessed the order, I've assessed the trees in deciding whether or not to make an order in the first place. I've assessed those trees as being members of a group because their canopies overlap and they're fairly coherent, they're in the same place, branches overlap with each other, and they, to my view, that means they form a group. But I've identified them as individual trees in the order because the advice that we've had from our legal department in the past has been quite clear that when it comes to defending a TPO and when it comes to enforcing a TPO, it can be very difficult to do that if you've identified the trees as a group rather than the individual components within it. So the reason I've set the order up in the way that I have is for robustness and for clarity about which tree is which and where the trees are. And so that's really separate from the actual assessment of the trees in the first place.
Rupert, can I just clarify, does that mean there's therefore a TPO on each one of the 5 trees individually, but when you talk about the group, you're talking about their group impact?
There's a single order to cover those 5 trees, and the 5 trees are identified individually within the order. So there's not a separate order for each tree, and the order could be modified. So the trees, in terms of their quality and impact, have been assessed as a group, but in terms of representing them in the order and to make the order clear and therefore defensible, each tree has been identified separately, so you can see what they are and where they are.
So would it be possible for us to exclude some of them from the TPO?
You could modify the order, and Catherine will give you advice about the procedure for doing that. But as I've suggested, T4 might be one that you consider removing if there's to be any modification, because it is, as you've observed, visible with difficulty, whereas T2 and T3, although they have a limited view, they do contribute quite a lot to that walkway along Gloucester Avenue.
Okay, Mrs. Stevenson-Wheeler, does that answer your question?
Slightly. I think I possibly would say that I feel a little bit aggrieved that the specifics of the order do quite clearly state that the order is raised on 5 individual trees, and you obviously have the option to deal with them as a group, or you have an option to deal with them individually, and it doesn't give a lot of room for manoeuvre to treat them as individual from a legal sense, but then to talk about them as a group, because it seems like there's a little win-win on both sides. I guess my grievance with the process is that, as you can see from a lot of the information that I've provided, and obviously the council have, that there have been a lot of changes and a lot of the information doesn't seem to have come across as a true picture, a whole picture. So the plan, for example, that wanted to be included, they said they wanted an Appendix 4 plan, but the trees are really far out from where they should be. And it just seems to be that some of the pictures, so for example, the 2 ash trees that have been provided in the picture together are actually, or that they've said that are the ash T1 and T5 are actually the 2 ash trees, not the silver birch, which again, the picture shows that it causes a coherent group, but in actual reality, they're 2 ash trees, they're not the silver birch, and it's not T5, the ash tree, and there is a clear gap. So the argument of the canopy is provided in my picture, in my sort of retort that I sent to Laura on Friday. It shows that there are clear spacings between them.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll bear that in mind.
Thank you.
But shall I reply to that? May I reply to that?
Please.
Hello. Yeah. I think I've covered the issue about the group and the individual trees distinction, so I won't go over that again, only to say that it's not a situation of having your cake and eating it. It's a question of assessing the quality of the trees and recording them in the order. That's all. There's been a question raised about which trees are shown in some of the photographs, and I think Mrs. Stevenson Wheeler is referring to photograph 2 in my Annex 4 report, which shows T1 to be a silver birch and T5 to be an ash. And what's being suggested is that the tree on the left, in fact, isn't the silver birch tree at all, but it's an ash tree. And what I want you to do is just to look at the 2 trees in that picture and see that the tree on the left-hand side, the silver birch that I'm identifying as a silver birch, has got drooping branches that are absolutely characteristic of a silver birch. And the ash tree on the right-hand side has got that much more rounded, upright canopy. And so those are trees T1 and T5. There are other ash trees behind T5, but you can't see those, or at least not very much, in that picture. So absolutely clear that the trees shown there are T1 and T5. Mrs. Stevenson Wheeler has shown photographs which show there's a gap and there's a distance between T1 and T5 at the height above those fruit trees, and she's absolutely right. There's some distance apart, but the fruit trees are between them, and all the way along. If you look at the various photographs, you'll see that there are overlapping branches. There was a continuous canopy as if you would look up from the ground or look down from an aerial view, and that's what's meant really by a continuous canopy, and that's why I've assessed them as a group. So.
Okay, Mr. Stevenson Wheeler, are you happy with that?
No, well, I'm afraid we still have a difference of opinion. Like I say, I feel that some of the evidence, like I say, my picture that I submitted in my second response, they are 2 ash trees. In Rupert's report, they actually really are 2 ash trees together. You can just see the tip of the silver birch behind the chimney of the house in the picture next to Braemar Court. The 2 ash trees literally are in the 2 back gardens of number 8 Mastin Avenue, and obviously the rear corner of our garden. So I still do disagree. I like to think, well, I do know that my picture that I've shown, standing slightly further down the road, gives a clear shot of the silver birch that I have identified as T1 and T5. There are actually a pair of ash trees that stand together, which is why they look continual, because there is one in our garden and then one in the garden of the rear of number 8 Mastin Avenue. So I still do disagree with that, but obviously that's for your, you to make a decision on. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, any members of the committee got any questions they'd like to ask for either the objector or no? Nobody? Okay, that's fine. Well, okay, in that case, the committee with the advisor's legal advisor is necessary.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, Councillor Kemp, to interrupt. Can I just double check that Mrs. Stevenson Wheeler and also Mr. Mastin have put everything they wanted to? Because I know some questions were asked, but I just want to double check that they feel they've put their case in full that they wanted to say. Please, thank you.
Mrs. Stevenson Wheeler, have you put your case as you would like to?
Yeah, I think I've done it on paper. So long as that information has been passed on and been looked at, then I can't do any more than obviously what I've put in for evidence for you.
And Mr. Mastin doesn't want to speak.
Hello. I'd only seek to add, if I may, that the imposition of the TPO across all 5 trees, it seeks to combat the highly urbanised environment. And my view was that on Gloucester, is it Gloucester Road, Gloucester Avenue? The 3 trees that in the middle, the 3 central trees which are being contested here, the quality of said trees, that they are not highly visible really from anywhere other than directly adjacent the walkway as it passes through to the Melton Road.
Yes.
And as a result, I don't see that they add that much value in the way that Rupert has asserted. The other 2, T1, T5, I don't think anyone is questioning they have value. But those 3 in the middle, we certainly were rather puzzled by that. And admittedly, that area is particularly, well, it's uninteresting. Bleak might be a bit strong, but a bit uninteresting. But one would have to travel down said walkway and crane over the fence and to really get a good view of them, which I don't think anyone would want to encourage in the first instance. Any further up that road on Gloucester Avenue, there's a green curtain that sort of dots the gardens off Mastin Avenue, which is rather unkempt, but it can be verdant. And at those times, that green curtain is rather pleasant, but that sort of ends at the two ash trees that we've been referring to, and the three smaller canopies are lower. They don't really form part of it. I feel they're concealed, and as such, I personally would be gratified if the committee were minded to omit the three central trees from the TPO altogether and just preserve T1 and T5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mastin. Okay, then the committee will then, with the advice of the legal advisors necessary, will now discuss the matter, decide whether or not the order should be confirmed, and if so, whether or not without modification. During this part of the meeting, the parties may not participate. However, this remains a public meeting, so the parties may continue to observe as they wish. Right, can I throw it open to committee members? Does anybody have anything they'd like to contribute? Don't forget, what we have to have at the end of this discussion is a proposal and a second. So should we start with Councillor Needham with a hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I actually live very close to this area, and I actually walk past this area very often. I think, as others were saying, T1 and T5 aren't really in question in amenity value at all, but I do have some sympathy for Mrs. Stevenson-Wheeler and Mr. Mastin, is that actually I think the fruit trees are very difficult to see from most places. I think, as you alluded to, Councillor Capleton, to actually see the fruit trees well, you actually have to stand really quite far back into Gloucester Avenue to see them. I do appreciate what Rupert's saying, is that they're a group, you know, that sort of form quite a nice group in there, but it is actually really quite difficult to see from anywhere publicly. So I think, to my mind, I would be open to the idea of modification, but I think the amenity of T1 and T5 aren't really in question.
Thank you. Keith?
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the chart and I'm looking at T3, where it says it will only get to this stage if argued grouping and not on the individual trees. So if 2 and 4 were removed, then that defensibility seems to disappear. So I would be in favour, as Councillor Needham is, of amending the order to remove the 3 trees in the middle.
Thank you. Is that a proposal?
Well, I wasn't making a proposal, but
we'll defer that for a little while. Simon, you have something to say?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I tend to agree with the other two councillors that have just spoken, really. Like Councillor Needham, I do live quite close to that area, and I do that walk quite a bit as well. And Councillor Needham's quite right. It is difficult to see those 3 trees from the alleyway. The other 2 definitely we should keep, but there is a case for a modification, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julian, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair, because I looked at it and I think I worked out there was 4 separate permutations on this. And I think I go towards Councillor Needham's. I mean, it was suggested maybe that we'd remove T4, but then that still leaves T2 and 3. And I have looked at it, and I looked at the previous tree on the previous order we discussed, which is highly visible. No one would object to saying that, you know, the copper beech, we had made the first decision of the meeting. Yeah. And I just don't think these are. And if we're going to say, well, there is 3 trees and there is 1 possible we knock out, I think, as I say, that we modify the order. So T1 and T5, which I understand the objector is okay with and exclude the others. But I would say that I can understand exactly why the order was worded as it was, that it is a group, but it is important to identify them individually to enable us to do this. Because if it was a group one without individual trees, it would be all or nothing then.
Yes.
So I could perfectly understand why they were identified. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Nothing else from anybody else? Well, having listened to the discussion, I think somebody has to make a proposal, so maybe me. I propose that we confirm the tree preservation orders for T1 and T5, but we lift the preservation orders for trees 2, 3 and 4. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Howe.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Right, we'll have to go for a named vote as well again.
Sorry, excuse me, sorry, Councillor Capleton, can we just confirm, can you just confirm the wording of the motion? We were talking about lifting an order, but I think what we're wanting to do from what you've just said is to confirm the order with modification, and the modification being to take out 2, 3 and 4.
That's right, Catherine, thank you. Okay, so yes, vote for or against Councillor Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to accept the order with the modifications we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Keith Harris. I was present throughout the whole proceedings, and I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Laurie Needham. I was present through the whole proceedings, and I vote in support of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Councillor Howe, I was present during the entire meeting, and I'm happy to accept the modification to the order.
Yes, and I, John Capleton, would like to accept the modification that we preserve the order on T1 and T5 and remove the order from T2, 3 and 4. Good. Right.
Councillor Capleton, have we have reason for the minutes?
Pardon?
Or
oh yes, we need.
just have a reason for our decision for the minutes. So.
Yes. Committee, having considered in accordance with the procedure set out the Council's constitution the objections to the order, committee considers that yes, that the order should be preserved on trees T1 and T5, and the order should be lifted on trees T2, T3 and T4. Is that all right, Catherine?
I think so. Laura would be doing the minutes. Have you got?
Yeah, I think it's on the basis that the committee considers that the objections to those 3 trees outweighed the amenity value, and that's why you've deleted those from the order. Is everyone happy with that?
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. I think that's about it. So thank you all, and yeah, see you next time.
Okay, so
formally.
Thank you, Councillor Capleton. I'm just going to end the live stream of the meetings. We're still. Is that okay, Matt, to do that? I've not done it before.